Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Strength and Recovery podcast, sponsored by Recovery Centers of America. I'm Jay Rodenbush, Director of Alumni Engagement for RCA and host of this podcast. We're so excited to be joined today by an amazing group of individuals, and we're very privileged to have them with us. And we just wanted to talk about the holidays and recovery, and such an important topic, such an amazing time of year, but also can be maybe a pain point. Can I say that, Jeff?
I agree.
For those, especially in early recovery. So just wanted to talk that through. And so I wanted them to introduce themselves. So Jeff, start us out here.
Hi guys, I'm Jeff Simone. I work in the IT department here at RCA. I got sober on November 12, 2016. So I just celebrated 7 years last month.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So this is my 8th holiday season, and I think it's a great topic, and I think there's going to be a lot of good discussion, and it's certainly something that a lot of people probably want to hear about. So thanks for inviting me.
So my name's Kevin Congdon. Hello, everyone. I work here at the Admissions Department for Recovery Centers of America. Also in recovery, my clean date is May 7th, 2019. So we're coming up on our 5th holiday season. And I can definitely relate to this topic for sure.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bob Gibson. I'm one of the alumni coordinators at Recovery Centers of America. I've been in recovery for a little over 5 years, and I'm really happy to be here to have this conversation.
Thanks so much for joining us. And we'll just launch into why do you think the holidays are such a trigger?
Yeah, I can start. I think that there's just a lot of emotion around it in general. You know, stressors, tend to be one of the more, highly correlated things with trouble in recovery. And there's no shortage of stressors around the holidays, whether it's financial, whether it's work, whether it's just family. Family's triggering, It's like it doesn't, and I say this a lot, it doesn't matter if if there's drugs or alcohol at home necessarily. Sometimes people think, I have a good family, my family's not gonna. It's like there's stuff there, right? I have a great family, I have a wonderful family, but the holidays were hard. They were hard despite that, right? It's like you don't have to be. My family doesn't have to be offering me drugs, for that to be a difficult situation, and it was, I know for me personally, and one of the first things that I start saying here, a lot of times, is just, that you can say no to as many of these events or many of these things as possible, right? It's like a lot of people, get themselves really into, what do I say to this one? I have to go to this holiday party. They're going to be drinking there. It's like, okay, there's plenty of situations where you're going to be in a not so great scenario. Right, mm-hmm. But that you can say no to a lot. This is about saving your ass, not your face, first and foremost, right? It's like I tell a lot of people, you might live 50 more years, right? It's like you'll have plenty of time to go to all these things, for the holiday season to be magical, for you to feel like you're having a great experience. If you say no, nobody's going to hold that against you. Right, it's like
practicing the no.
No one's gonna
being able to say, I can't make it."
I remember back in 2023 when you didn't show up to that. It's like no one's gonna, But if you get drunk and you flip the table and you punch this guy in the face, they're gonna remember that.
And that your no is enough, I think, can be. Yeah. I think that's what's setting any boundary. Not thinking, I have to have 500 excuses. Just saying, I'm sorry, I can't make it,
right.
And that is sufficient.
Right. I can't tell you how many things I said no to in the beginning. And there are little tricks, that you can do. So I got sober on November 12th, 2016. So that was a couple weeks before Thanksgiving. And that was around here, so prior to that, I had been introduced to recovery. I was actually court ordered in May of 2013. All right. And I was living in Southern California, and that was my first introduction. And, Southern California has some really good recovery. I'm blessed actually that I was introduced to the group of guys that I was introduced to. Now it didn't stick. I wasn't quite ready at that point, but that whole experience, allowed me that once I did get sober in the Philadelphia area, I was able to plug in like really quick, so we were taking on commitments. We would just go down to Mercy Hospital and Belmont Hospital and Friends Hospital. That we had a lot of these things going, so the one of them was on Thursday night, and Thursday night happened to be Thanksgiving, and I kept it, right. So I went to Thanksgiving. We did that for a couple hours with family. I mean, I was a couple weeks sober at this point, right? So and it was really, really bad. Like long withdrawals coming off of like dependencies on a lot of different things: opiates, amphetamines, muscle relaxers, benzos. So it was not good. But I was there. I kind of showed my face, and then I left. And we drove down to Friends Hospital, right? So I wouldn't say that was an excuse, to leave, but I didn't. But I let it work for me, right? I know somebody who's saying, "Oh, you can skip it, right?" It's like it's just one. We can get somebody to cover that for you. But I remember thinking, like, no, I kind of want to use this, right? Because this lets me. I can show up to my family. We had dinner. It was very nice. And then by the time any kind of alcohol or really like anything else was going to be coming out, I was out. So that was I guess one of the things that I was able to use early on that seemed to help.
Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. So I think Jeff had a couple of good points. Early in recovery, I remember, the fear of showing up to family parties when knowing that there'd be family members there drinking. I think, everyone in my family, for the most part, I'm the only one in recovery. I have, 18 total cousins, big family. And we really do cherish the holiday time. Like, I enjoy this time of year for sure. But I recall being early in, sobriety and just having that overwhelming, like, nervous feeling. Even, like, I got clean in May. So I remember going down the beach that year with the family, and people were going down to the beach with coolers. And, I just had to learn how to, like, set healthy boundaries. Whether that was like, listen, I'm just going to come for an hour or two, until I felt the need that, it was time to go, once people started getting a little out of hand and whatnot. So that was important for me for sure. Having like
how do you recognize that moment? Like, yeah, it's time for me to go, and listen to it, right? Like, it's one thing to recognize it and then act on it.
Yeah, for me, and I'll be honest, like, this was something I talked in depth with my sponsor about back then. And I remember he's like, listen, the Irish goodbye is okay. If you're at that point where you're just starting to feel uncomfortable, you don't need to explain yourself to anyone. No one's going to probably, remember the next day that you left early or you didn't say goodbye. You're going to see them probably the next day at the next family party. So just being able to be in tune with, like, when it was time. And another key point was I remember my first year in recovery for those events. Like, I actually brought someone along with me from, like, my support group that was also in recovery. So I had someone there that we had, like, the common thing going on, and we could kind of lean on each other. Like, if I was feeling uncomfortable, it was time to go. We left.
Just slip out.
Yeah. And then another, like, kind of a hot topic now with, 4.5 years clean, and Jeff touched on this, is like, learning how to have, like, a healthy balance of all of the commitments and obligations, because, having all this, clean time now, and, like, wanting to be invited, like, family members are now wanting me to be around, and everyone's inviting you to all these events, whether it's Pollyanna stuff, work events. My girlfriend lives in North Jersey, so we have to travel a lot for some of these events, and it's learning how to say no has been a difficult thing for me. My sister actually just gave birth to my first and only nephew. This is my first experience being, an uncle in recovery. I have no children myself, so I'm super excited about this. And there's all these other events that have been planned for months now, where I want to spend a lot of my time in the next few weeks, going over to her house. So, it's something me and my sponsor were talking about after a meeting last night, like, just learning how to say no. It's okay.
And not, and allowing yourself the permission to not get overscheduled.
Exactly. Because, for me, and this is for myself, like, I was a big people pleaser. So saying no was difficult for me. And always wanting to show up. My mom, like I said, family is super important to us. And last weekend she texted me, hey, we have our big family Pollyanna party next Saturday. And I said, I got to look at the schedule. I got to talk through some things, and I got to get back to you. And that's probably not something my mom wanted to hear, because she wrote back, well, why not? Why would you not be there? This is our family party, right? But I also have to keep like my recovery in the forefront too right now. Like I had a commitment to speak at a meeting last night. These are also events after my 50-hour work week, right, that I have to find time and to schedule and do. So I think for me, it's just learning how to navigate that balance, because like I said, like the more that you're, your life becomes fuller and you're staying clean, like the more opportunities that are presented, the more doors that open, and the more relationships you have. Your network gets so big between recovery folks, work folks, family folks, friends folks, that it becomes a very difficult balancing act, and that's been my experience.
Bob, I think this really speaks to you. I mean, I see you as someone who lives a really disciplined life with your schedule. And can you talk a little bit about that and how that's interrelated to the holiday stuff?
Sure, yeah. So I guess the thing that I've been thinking about while I was sitting here, so the way that when I was newer in recovery, I absolutely kind of agree with like what Jeff was saying. Like I just didn't go to things. If I wasn't comfortable in my mind, it just like wasn't worth risking my recovery. And so like alcoholics and addicts, like generally speaking, we're like an incredibly self-centered group of people, and we think that like everyone's going to be like super concerned with like where we are and if we left early and why we weren't there. But the reality is like most of the time, like we're thinking about ourselves way more than anybody else is. So like these guys alluded to, the odds are like a year or two later after that event, nobody's going to even remember that I was not there. The other thing, as far as like just remaining disciplined in that routine. So for example, on Christmas this year, my home group is on Christmas. They're not going to not have the meeting. And my family also like wants to have me, because like these guys also mentioned, like my family wants me around. They like being around me today, which wasn't like always the case. But I had a conversation with them earlier this week, and I'm going to go there. I'm going to have some food with them, and I'm going to leave a little bit early to go to my home group. So like in reality, it's just another day. Like just because it's a holiday doesn't mean that I'm not going to do the things that I'm supposed to do to stay sober. I'm still going to pray. I'm still going to talk to people on the phone. If it's my home group especially, I'm still going to go to a meeting regardless. So just treating it like any other day. And then the other last thing I wanted to throw out, so another thing, this isn't my experience, but it might be some other people's. There's going to be a lot of people in early recovery that might not have anywhere to go during the holidays. They might not be welcome with their family or anywhere else because of some of the harms that we cause when we're out there using. So just putting it out, if you get yourself involved in like really any recovery fellowship in existence, they're normally doing things all day on the holidays, normally 24 hours straight. They're having meetings every hour. There's food. So if you don't have anywhere to go, I would just like try Googling your recovery fellowship of choice, seeing where there's meetings, and they're probably doing stuff on the holidays. You'll have somewhere to go.
That's awesome. And several of you mentioned service, like as a part of, having commitments to speak, or has that been part of?
Yeah, and I actually my first year sober, I was just sitting here thinking. That was a God moment, right? Because I was still sick. I was still actively. I've been to treatment this past time. I kind of did it more of like an outpatient setting. It was I don't recommend that, right? But I was I was sick. This meeting was at 6:00 in the morning. About 45 minutes from my house. Okay, which means that some guy picked me up. I had known him for a couple weeks now. Okay, he was at my house, my apartment at the time, at like 5-something in the morning, and I was there. It would be hard for me to do that today, right? It's hard for me to get up and be, it's cold, it's dark. I was whatever, 14, 17 days still actively sick, and I did that. Wow. That was just when we talk about those little, just those little windows. I truly believe we get these windows of opportunity. Us, the addicted population, get these little windows, and it's like you don't know how long that window is going to open, and when it slams shut, you don't know if it's ever going to open again. It's like that day, whatever that day was, November 20 something. 2016, when I had about 14 days, I was willing enough to, I don't even know if I slept, because I wasn't sleeping very much, but I was up and I was dressed enough to walk outside cold, put a button, I was freezing, shivering, and I walked out there and I got in and I sat in that room, and it was stuff like that that really helped, and like Bob was saying, nowadays it's like, if that is a commitment, and if that commitment is is going on a certain date. It doesn't really matter what the date is, right? It's like if it's, if you're hosting for that month and it's a Friday and the Friday happens to be December, 26th, and there's going to be, it's like you're going to that first, and I think stuff like that's important. So you don't really have to run it through the filter of like, should I be doing this? It's kind of like, this is what I do, so I am doing this. And then if somebody asks you something else, you say, maybe we can get together some other time. I'm chairing a meeting this day, or I'm speaking this day. We used to actually intentionally put ourselves on, like around the holidays because, again, it's like now I do enjoy it. I have a 7-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. They say don't make any major decisions your first year. I had a baby. So.
How'd that work out for you?
Well, actually, I had the baby first, and
awesome.
And then I say again, I don't recommend that. I don't recommend having a baby at home when you're trying to. But that's the way that it was, and I actually love the fact that he's I have 7 years, he has 7 years. He understands it now, that he has, not fully, obviously, but he asks questions, the big picture of him holding my 7-year chip, a big smile on his face, that he knows stuff, that he knows, like when he was sick, when he was born, Daddy was sick, that he knows that there was a time where I couldn't stop using drugs. And he kind of like understands just the ideas of like wanting to stop and he can't. He's kind of old enough now just to be able to understand some of that stuff. But but those first couple of holidays, it's like I had that thought in my head, very very clear. Is so clear in my head of just, all right, you're gonna live 50 more years. That 50 years was always in my head. You're gonna live 50 more years. All right, this is just like a sacrifice, for the greater good. Okay, so if you want the next 49 to be decent, to be for you to be alive and actually potentially like enjoying these, you got to get this first one right. And I say that all the time. I mean, the first year, it's like the expectation is be sober. Survive in advance. It's like nothing else. Not be sober and have a magical Christmas. Like nothing has to feel magical.
It's the pressure I think that we put on ourselves that these days need to be magical or they need to be special, and they can be, right? But just how do you remove the pressure? You have thoughts on that, Kevin?
Well, I was thinking about that, and you were talking about being in service during the holiday season, and for me, right, like my way of giving back is trying to be in service to not only just like members of my fellowship, whether it's sponsees or other people that are in my support group, but like giving back to my loved ones, because I think back to the times where, and I have to be transparent, like I've missed many of holidays in jails and institutions for a very long time. There was a point in time where I was incarcerated for 9 months, and I remember my sister was graduating high school. I was sending like letters home. No one was returning my letters. No one was answering my phone calls. Nobody was sending money up for me, and I was just in a very miserable and lonely place. But selfishly in that moment, like it was about me. And with some time clean now, like you look back on those moments and just seeing how like excited my family is to have me be a part of now and how much they want me around. Thinking back, like, all the family pictures, right? Like when I walk in my grandmother's house and I see all the holiday family pictures and there's everyone in the family, all the cousins, and I'm not in those pictures. And yes, it hurts me, but I got to think about like in my mother in those moments, like how upset my mom was that like her only son was not there to like participate and be a part of those life experiences, So nowadays, like for me, I try to like give back, like being in service. Part of this is like giving back to those people that have, been there for me too. So I try to take that into account, right? But when I'm scheduling all those events, like it's just important for me to be there, participate, and just give back to those loved ones that are excited to have me there.
And how do you go about, I think a lot of families listen in, and a lot of people are trying to navigate the family dynamic, and maybe it's the first time that you're invited back, or and families, they're not sure, like, do they serve alcohol, do they not, like, everybody's kind of on eggshells, right? How do you have those conversations and say, hey mom, here's what I need, or here's what you could, or like, talk us through that. Anyone's welcome. It's like we don't have to go in a circle.
I'll slide in.
Sounds good. This is Bob.
Hi everyone, it's Bob again. So I'll just, like, once again, I can only really speak on my own experience with this concept. So when I was even like relatively early on in recovery, I was kind of coached up by people who had been around longer than me, and the idea is not to, try to mold the world to fit me. It's trying to kind of get myself to a place where I can fit into it, regardless of like what's going on around me, finding a way to like be okay and safe and stable within that. So for me, I personally didn't want people to act differently around me. I don't want to go to a Thanksgiving or Christmas and have everybody walking on eggshells and think that they can't have a drink or two if they want. The people that are in my family are, quote unquote, normal drinkers. So I don't want them to feel like they have to change their behavior on account of me. But I will say they would offer, which, was appreciated. And they checked to see if I was comfortable, which once again, I appreciated. But like really,
and what does that sound like? What is checking to see if you're comfortable? I think just really practically, like as a mom or dealing with a sister or loved one, how do I talk to my brother who's coming in the door?
So now they, I've been sober a little while, so they're aware that like it's not really something that's bothersome for me. But in the beginning, they would straight up just ask. They would just be like, hey, does it make you uncomfortable that I'm drinking this? And I would, tell them the truth. But like really, once again, like this is just my perspective. People don't have to use it. I can't like expect like the world to change and ebb and flow for me. I gotta find a way to be okay within it. And it goes back to like, if I don't feel comfortable going somewhere, I'm not going. And when it's time to leave, it's time to leave. Like these guys talked about the Irish exit. I was notorious for that when I was drunk. I do it sober. I did it like very recently. Don't tell anybody. But I was at 2 weddings like pretty recently. I know it's not a holiday, but it's like a similar event. There's people are jovial, they're celebrating. And I always kind of have my thing where there's a turn, and it happens at like every event that I'm at where people are drinking, where like it goes from where people are just like kind of feeling a little good and being a little silly to now they're drunk. Now they're like saying the same thing to me over and over again. And once that starts to happen, that's my signal to go. I leave like when that change happens, and like you can just watch a room and like you can see it happen. Most people hit that point like kind of at the same time, and then like I don't belong there anymore. That's kind of like my mindset.
And if you're going to an event with someone who's newly sober, and what would your advice be for that person who's accompanying someone, maybe a spouse or like a family member?
Like if I'm a family member going with my spouse who is newly
in
sober.
recovery, right?
Yeah. So first, I mean, I like what Bob was just saying, just about like the indications of when you should leave. So when it gets like that, and I agree with that, especially in the beginning. You need those little. I will say now, like I don't stay long. Like, not because I think that it's a risky, just because like it's boring, right? It's like I have no business. My time is valuable, right?
You got 2 kids at home.
Yeah, my time is valuable. But each hour, like, I am intentional with. It's like I'm only going to be places that I want to be, or that I feel that I want to partake in something. So it's like everybody. Once in a while, there will be exceptions. Okay, so just maybe 2 weeks ago, my wife had there was a surprise birthday party for her. Okay, that her friends threw for her. So I stayed there a little bit longer in terms of through the drinking stuff, but it's like very rarely does that happen. My wife is, she's not in recovery. She was just maybe would drink. I mean, quote unquote normally, right? Just to kind of whenever maybe regular people drink. I don't even know what that looks like, but whatever. But I will tell you that over the last 7 years, I don't think we've had alcohol in the house. I mean, possibly ever. right? There's some people, well, what if I have friends come over and it's like, let them bring it.
Yeah.
Right? Like I can't, even if we hosted a party, let them bring it. If you feel so uncomfortable showing up where there's not alcohol, then go somewhere else. Right? It's like, like that is how you could potentially support somebody if you don't have a problem. I've also said to people, they say, well, my wife knows that I'm an alcoholic and I don't need, but she likes to drink once in a while. So, she wants to keep it in the house. And, sometimes I'll say things like, if she knows that if you drink, your entire household starts to fall apart and she is just going to bring it in anyway, despite that, maybe she's got something to look at. I don't know. Possibly. Right. So I know that my situation is a little bit different because I'm just more black and white with some of that kind of stuff.
It's a choice you've made as a family.
Yeah, as a family. This is just
it's a family disease.
Yeah.
And a family recovery.
You might find Gatorade in the fridge. You're not going to find whiskey.
Yeah.
You're not going to find beer.
I think, and this kind of all ties back to why it's so important to have, be involved in some sort of 12-step fellowship or have that sober support network, because no one can really relate to the way we think, the way we feel in these situations other than people who struggle with the same problem that we struggle with, who have experienced the same things that we have experienced with. Like everything that I've learned in life, like to this point with, almost 5 years clean at this point, has come from someone in recovery. Like any adulting type stuff, like I'm in the midst of, a house buying process, and my old sponsor was the one who helped me build my credit. Going to these family events during the holiday season, I'm not going to go ask my 84-year-old grandmother, like, hey, what are your thoughts on if I'm feeling uncomfortable because Uncle Johnny's drinking this weekend, right? Like she's not going to have the answer for me that I'm looking for that's probably going to help me, So this all ties back to why it's so important to have those people in your life, be it a sponsor, be it other members of your fellowship that have experienced these same issues, because they are the ones who can relate to this. And so for me, like all of those uncomfortable conversations and how to navigate those relationships, whether it be with a significant other who still drinks or like those ideas are always bounced off of someone that's in my direct circle prior to that.
I think that's amazing advice.
Yeah.
And, we work with alums and often new to recovery. I haven't got a sponsor yet. How critical is going into the holidays getting a sponsor?
Yeah, I mean, it's for me. It's basically the key to my whole recovery process. I grew up. My father, wasn't around for a majority of my life, isn't to this point. I have a difficult time like opening up and getting vulnerable with men, especially in a group setting, like showing up to meetings. It wasn't something I was great at, right? Like putting my hand up, participating, and getting actually honest on the floor about what's actually going on. And like through that sponsorship relationship that I've been able to like overcome that and like slowly open up about all types of issues, whether it's, I'm not one to put my hand up in a meeting and put all of my business on the floor when it comes to like, it could be like sexual related, whatever it is, those things that maybe you're uncomfortable with putting on the floor, which, for me, that's just not something I do, but I better sure have a relationship with someone, be it my sponsor, that I can open up and discuss those topics with. And so like those things don't keep me sick. So for me, like the sponsor piece it's really the meat and potatoes. This is someone who's going to walk you through the steps, someone that you're going to build a relationship with, and those, to guide you through the step process and through this whole process altogether.
And I would say too, like if you believe that addiction is a disease, okay, if you accept that, and if you agree with the concept of the disease centers in our mind, not our body, well, then that is suggesting that our thinking is not right, at least in the beginning. At least in the beginning, right? I think I'm not going to put a time limit on it, but I'll say at least in the beginning. If that is true, then you can't use that same thinking to figure out what you should be doing your first sober holidays, for example.
Oh, that's good stuff.
There's like a line in the book that says something like to the effect of if we are on firm spiritual ground, we can go anywhere, quote unquote, normal men go. And it's like, I remember reading that and saying to my sponsor after a couple of months, I think I'm on firm spiritual ground. He's like, I'll let you know when you're on firm spiritual ground, right? So it's like, I think at this point, I could probably say with some certainty. I said like earlier, I feel like my spirituality is a little bit off right now, right? It's like I think that I can kind of, navigate that feeling myself. When you have a couple months sober, you can't, right? It's like you just don't know that you haven't been sober long enough to know what stable feels like.
And the brain is healing.
You just don't know what that is, right? It's like you might not have been stable for 15 years in terms of real like emotional stability.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to use that same brain now at 6 weeks sober, going into your first Christmas, to really be able to determine I should go here, I shouldn't go here? So like Kevin was saying, it's like you need other people, who you like trust and respect. I mean, that's the biggest thing. If you are somebody with active addiction and you don't trust and respect this person, you're not going to follow what they say anyway.
And it can be really scary. Somebody can say, well, I have a great supportive family. I can just talk to my wife about this. I can talk to my husband about this. However, that can be really scary for them to hear, well, I'm feeling tempted at this moment, or is that sponsor give you kind of a safe space to share things that maybe that supportive family should or shouldn't be involved in? How does that work? Because you're supposed to be open with your spouse. Who wants to take that one? Everybody's pointing at each other. Go for it.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you brought that up, Jay. It's actually like a really good point. It's something that I talk about with alums all the time before they leave treatment. And it's just like a suggestion that I had received from others previously, which is everything I know about everything recovery related, and honestly, like life-wise at this point, is things that I just heard other people say or that I was taught, and nothing is like original from me at all. But like the one thing I explain to patients all the time, like if I'm thinking about, let's say, using heroin, which like occasionally I have thoughts. I no longer have an obsession. I don't go do it, which is like the difference. But like the thought comes sometimes. And if I were to have that thought and then call my mother and just say like, hey mom, how's it going? Just thinking about using heroin. Just thought I wanted to let you know. My mom.
Oh my God, Bob.
Yeah, she doesn't need that. She's probably not going to sleep for like a month. If I say that to her with like the amount of trauma that I've put her through. But like if I say that to somebody else in recovery, they're probably not even going to blink. I have people that I've worked with over the years that will reach out to me when they're thinking about using, and it's not that like I don't care. It's not that I'm empathetic, but like I'm so used to that type of event happening, and I've been around long enough that I know that just because they're thinking about it doesn't mean that they're going to do it, that it's not going to rock my world. It's not going to like affect my sleep. I'm not going to become overly emotional afterwards. But like somebody who's not in recovery, their reaction might not be good. It might freak them out. So better to just like, doesn't necessarily have to be a sponsor, but like somebody else in recovery that gets it, that knows that like, hey, a thought doesn't necessarily mean like there's going to be an action afterwards.
And understanding your mom's relationship and her role in your life is different than the role that a sponsor, someone you're allowing, a therapist, is going to be able to speak into your life in a different way.
Yep.
And handle that responsibility. There's a lot of responsibility associated with a statement like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's good chapters in the big book, to wives, to the family afterwards,
Yes.
and it kind of addresses some of these exact things, right? And there's family dynamics are huge. What I love about those chapters actually is that, just think about like how much the world has changed, right, in the last 90 whatever years since the big book was published, 1939. But yet you could read these chapters about just, some little group in Akron, Ohio that was meeting 90 years ago, and the stuff still applies, right? So that's why you can see that
Principles.
These are just kind of general. The human nature of addiction as we know it is sort of the same, right? Like these same kind of ideas, and I do think that you need to be leaning on other people that you can identify have had your same issue, your same problem. Because again, it's not, if you were with your spouse before and you were using and now you're not, it's like if this spouse or mother or anybody else, if their love was able to save you and cure you, right, we wouldn't be having this problem. It's like we are loved people. People that we have people that are in our lives. It's like there's something else going on here. Part of that, sponsorship thing. It's you need to be surrounded by people. Also, just the fact that by nature the family can't possibly know all the alcohol was not my my drug of choice. Okay. So it's like, why should alcohol even be like a thing for my family? Why should they even think twice about alcohol? It's like, that's not just like intuitive for family members. If if your thing is opiates and that was what drove you into, that's what got you in trouble with the law. That's what got you in jail. That's what made you lose your job, all that kind of stuff. And these people have seen you drinking casually, at least, right, from the time that you were younger. It's like, why shouldn't you be able to do that now? And it's like, we can't possibly expect that family is going to understand, because like a lot of this stuff is sort of beyond, beyond just common knowledge. Even the people that have their ear to the grindstone and that maybe show up to some stuff. I mean, some family members are more plugged in with their own recoveries and Al-Anon programs, for example, and that helps. By the way, I mean, I encourage family all the time to do that, right? Because you're not going to be able to think just like we're not able to think our way out of it, the family's not going to be able to think their way into saving you either, and that stuff's important.
Talk a little bit about, or maybe to the family, the individual in active addiction, and going into the holidays again, it just adds a layer of stress. What are some advice, or what's some advice that you would give to families whose loved one is in active addiction?
Yeah, I can kind of elaborate on that one. Obviously this is something that I deal with on a day in and day out basis here at work, but just from
Kevin,
my experience,
you were helping families who they're looking to get their loved one in treatment, right?
Sure. So, families call in every day, right? I have my son, cousin, brother, girlfriend that's struggling. I have no idea what to do, no idea how to help. And it's difficult. I've had personal experience with this as well, with sponsees, friends, family, but most importantly, like from my experience, right? And I'm just thinking back to this. Like, I think setting healthy boundaries is like the best suggestion that I can honestly give to someone in that situation. For me, it was like so many times. My grandmother will call it, right? Like, enable me to just continue to show up at the house. Like, left treatment, AMA. Had a place to go back and knock on the door the next morning, right? Like, if I needed to finesse my way into getting money again, like, that was there. So I think for me that the best recommendation is you just have to learn how to put your foot down and set healthy boundaries. It's difficult to do because I know we love these people unconditionally. But for me, for this addict alcoholic, until the consequences were great enough and, I had burnt those bridges and had nowhere else to turn. I have emotional and physical scars, right, from my using, and for me it was till the consequences got great enough. I just wasn't ready. Doors were still open, places to sleep, people to call, money to get. So I just think that the healthy boundary piece is the most important one, and I know that that's easier said than done sometimes. Whether it's and
it's going back to just exercising the right to say no.
Yep, absolutely.
And knowing that is not necessarily a bad thing or something that's going to increase the problem.
And Jeff talked about that, those Nar-Anon and Al-Anon programs that loved ones and families can go to. I remember for me, someone recommended that for my grandmother and my mom. And I remember they went there and they were blown away. They were so upset leaving there because people told them the truth. Because sometimes it's not just me that's the problem as the addict and alcoholic. If we're someone that's enabling that behavior and sometimes, there's a lot of psychology in a lot of different situations, but sometimes the codependency piece is another factor, right? We're just scared to let them go because we're scared to be lonely too. My grandma maybe didn't want to sit through the holidays by herself because she wanted me in that house, whether I was using or not. So it's just a different dynamic to look at. But those Nar-Anon and Al-Anon meetings, they give very good insight and perspective. It's literally just other moms and dads who have been through this before, whether their son or daughter's actively using, they could be in that group because their son and daughter has significant amounts of clean time, or they could be in that group their loved one passed away from this disease. So I would recommend that for any family members to kind of go there and get the information for sure. And that is a 12-step fellowship for loved ones, not necessarily struggling with addiction, but a support group for you to go and talk to. So that would be my recommendation.
Bob.
I just wanted to slide in on another idea. So the one thing I would throw out too, so if you are the loved one of somebody who's in active addiction, and you get like that window. So Jeff alluded to it earlier. Like there's these like small little like windows of opportunity where like an alcoholic or an addict might have like a moment of clarity, and it's normally like very brief, where they might like kind of see their life for what it is for a moment. We're like very delusional when we're using, but sometimes we have these moments, and if they have one of those moments and they're talking about wanting to get treatment, highly suggest not telling them like, oh, well, like, why don't you go after the holiday? Because they might lose that willingness to go get help in 10 minutes, let alone like 4 days, 5 days. So if somebody's willing to go, I would strongly advise not trying to make them wait to go through a holiday first. And secondly, if they are in treatment and there's a holiday coming up, not pulling them out to make it to the holiday. Like let them finish their course of treatment. My situation, like the first time I went to a detox was right before Thanksgiving. And I kind of weaponized that to get out of there before I should have. I went in there, I stayed for 5 days, and then, I appealed to my mother that I can't miss Thanksgiving. So you have to let me come home. I can't possibly be in here for Thanksgiving. So I came home way, way sooner than I was supposed to, and I didn't stay sober. But once again, like it was talked about going to those programs for the loved ones of the alcoholic or addict. If my mother had been going to one of those, she would have known better. She would have known that she shouldn't have pulled me out of there. So just putting that out as well.
And talk a little bit about the importance. I think so many times people think, well, I got the substance or the alcohol, I got that out of my body, so I'm good, right? I detoxed. I went to a program for 7 to 10 days. The drug is out of my system, so I'm okay now, and I can go home. Why is staying in treatment? Why is that so important? Do you want to take that, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, So I will say that the first time there are a lot of folks who will end up in some type of treatment multiple times. That's common. I will say that the majority of people, myself included, prior to that first time getting in, that you really do think that the problem is the drugs. Because why wouldn't you? Most of your problems seem to be caused by the drugs. You're spending all your money on the drugs. The cops are on your case because of the drugs, right? It's like they're not on you because you're thinking goofy. They're on you because you're doing this because of the drugs. So that was what I thought that the problem was, and for many, many years, and I became obsessed with this idea. I remember having this very, very clear picture. Like if you could just put me in some kind of like medically induced coma, okay? Because I was chemically dependent, I was strung out on opiates, okay? I tried to stop, I couldn't, I got sick. And I was working, right? So just the whole, I can't leave, I can't take time off from work. What are they going to do without me? It turns out they fired me and they were fine. This is one of the biggest companies. They're doing fine. Their stocks prices are still okay, despite the fact that I'm not with the company. But I remember thinking, like, if I could just be in this, 1 year, right? Put me, feed me through a tube and I can wake up after a year and I'm totally cleaned out like I was when I was like 15, and I could just walk out and be totally fine. And I did get brought into this treatment, against my will at the time, but sometimes it has to be like that. And I finished the detox, and I was actually court ordered to do 3 months, which is still not happy about that decision. But I told my first sponsor, this is cruel and unusual punishment. He said, listening to you is cruel and unusual punishment. I said, 3 months, come on.
Sounds like a good sponsor.
Anyway, so I did the 3 months, and I came out, and I was still, I was as sober as I am right now physically. I was completely cleaned out of everything. Nothing stronger than caffeine in my body for 3 months. And I came out, and I ended up relapsing after just a couple days, really. But then after that first time, that's when I realized that there's more going on than just, what I mean? Because it's like when you start using after having not used for a couple hours and you're sick, well, you can say that's because of the drug, the whatever you want to call it. The phenomenon of craving and all the stuff that comes on when the drugs are still flowing through your system. But what happens when you have months and months of abstinence from this stuff, and then you pick right back up? It's like, well, there's something else going on, and it's hard. It's hard to convince somebody of that. Somebody who has not experienced it themselves, right? That that the alcohol is just a symbol of your problems. The real disease centers in your brain, not your body. And it's I agree with Bob though. If a family can do anything over that time, it's not, don't put any hurdles in front of this person. It's like this is a disease of guilt and shame. I mean, we are the kings and queens of doing that to ourselves. So we don't need anything. Oh, but your Aunt Molly loves the cookies you bake. She wants to see you. Like, none of that crap. If this guy just wants to disappear into his 12-step community or into the, whatever community for a couple of months and then appear, pray that is the case. Pray that might happen. I mean, really keep expectations low. To answer your first question, you said about like an active, that's a lot harder, right? Those situations are all going to be just case by case. I mean, I've never had personal experience with a child, right, who is in active addiction. So I think I never pretend to understand what, say, the immediate family or the parents are going through. I can't imagine it. I will say there is an incredible book. It's In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. You might have heard of it. The Gabor Mate wrote it. He's got a chapter at the end, and it's talking precisely to families of a person who's actively addicted. And I think that if you read that chapter, that sums it up about as well as I've heard anybody. He's an addiction researcher. He used to work in the downtown east side of Vancouver, which to my knowledge was the only open air drug market that could rival Kensington, right? It's so like if you're familiar with Kensington, it's extremely like unique place. Okay, I don't think there's anywhere else in this country at least that's quite like it. But this place is like that, right? So he worked there. It's a lot of folks who are not necessarily trying to get sober. I mean, they're just maybe trying to not die that day. Is kind of what it boils down to. And he talks to family members, right? Like what you can do, because it's very, very hard for families. And
now, how do we discern, and maybe there is no way, but if our loved one is in early recovery, from what is isolation, like, hey, I'm going to go sit in my room and I need to be out of the room, versus what is self-care or working their program, or how do you balance that? Because I think a lot of times loved ones, family members, like, we start doing the overscheduling and we're going to be with you all the time and we're going to hold your hand through this. Talk about that a little bit.
I can recall back when I was first engulfed into this recovery process, and those events came up, right? Like the speaker jams or the marathon meetings, that took priority, like, because I had to put my recovery first. And I remember, family members being disappointed that I wasn't going to make every single party. But the reality is, like, as a loved one, the first, like, especially when you're new in this process, like we talk about the 90 meetings in 90 days and, the getting of the sponsor. It's so important for the person who's, beginning in this recovery process to start, like, spreading their wings and really trying to get embedded into this, recovery world. So, like, there's a healthy balance between, like you talked about, like, overscheduling, and also being understanding that, like, if there's something that's prioritized, like whether it could be a commitment at a meeting, going to a meeting, maybe they just want to go and enjoy some time with their fellowship folks. Like, because I remember there was times where we just wanted to, like, 6 or 7 of my buddies, we planned to do something for that weekend. And so I just think you have to understand the importance of, like, allowing your loved one who's engulfing into this recovery process to, like, allow them their space to try to do that. And, just allow them to do that.
That's awesome. Any last thoughts we have here as we wrap up?
Yeah.
Go, Jeff.
One other point I think too that it's important is for the actual person who's trying to not drink or use other drugs, is to make that kind of declaration in your head, like, that day, they make it firm, right? So I was just talking to somebody recently, and everybody's experience here is different. I mean, my thing happened to be pretty kind of big news, right? So all my family and friends kind of found out overnight, right? So that took away. I wasn't telling anybody. I mean, my stuff was very hidden, in terms of what I was choosing to tell people, right? But then there was something that happened that kind of everybody found out overnight, all right? So, which was horrible at the time, Now, like looking back, what an advantage that is, really, right? Because you don't have to worry anymore. Oh, what do I tell him? What do I tell her? How do I say this? It's like everybody knew. Okay, crap. So that's not good. But now looking back, I think that made it easier.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to this woman, and so nobody really knows her situation. She drinks wine casually with them, right? But then she'll do like the bottle before and the bottle after, like in secret kind of thing. And her problem is serious, but everybody doesn't know about it. So she goes to this party and she says to them, like in the beginning, she had about, I don't know, 10 days sober at this point or something. And she was saying, guys, I'm really trying not to drink right now. Okay. I think she used those words. I'm really trying not to drink right now. That's about as firm as she, and so maybe the first or second time they brought the bottle out, she passed, right? Because I'm trying not to drink right now. And then as they were getting a little bit more tipsy, they offered it to her again, like a little bit stronger, and then she drank, and then kind of set her off on this little spiral, right? But I recommend people just be firm. Mm-hmm. It's hard sometimes, but if it's alcohol, right? I am not drinking. Mm-hmm. That's it, right? Most people are not going to be pushing you any more than that. Do you want to drink? No, thank you, right? Mm-hmm. So, for the people who might not know that you're in recovery and you say, oh, what do I say when my friend asks me no, thank you. Most of the time that works, right? It's like the majority of people aren't thinking enough about you to push on that anymore. Why aren't you drinking? Do you have my first sponsor too, he would say, if somebody would say to him, why, do you have a problem with alcohol? And he would say, no, do you? Right? He would just spin it back on, this is, somebody who doesn't know his situation. This is somebody casual. And people, we really get in our heads a lot about what do I say? And most of the time,
and hopefully,
I'm not drinking.
Hopefully, as a culture, we're getting better about not asking why. But the stigma, is reducing, but it still exists. But obviously, just being able to say no, or being able to say I'm in recovery, can solve a lot of problems. So.
And I'll just kind of end with, I was doing a lot of reflecting, as the year end approaches, and it's, I think back to early recovery and all those uncomfortable decisions that I made and did all those things that I necessarily didn't want to do, whether it was those commitments and those, the recovery house, going there after treatment, and just year over year, incrementally. And I don't know, this year has just been a huge milestone in so many areas, professionally, relationship. There's just a ton of things that have been happening over the last year, but every year I incrementally have seen growth, and I look back and I just think about how much clarity I've gained and how much self-awareness that I've gained, just year over year by doing those uncomfortable things and making some of those small sacrifices. So if you're new to recovery, I just think it's important, like I said, just for me, get to a meeting, put your hand up and get vulnerable and just introduce yourself, and allow people in whatever fellowship you choose to do to just support you through this process. So.
That's good. Bob, any last thoughts?
Sure. So I guess kind of to backtrack a little bit, we were talking about what the loved one of a person in early recovery should kind of be doing, if you guys are going to an event together. And I just wanted to put out I would have a conversation before you go about so let's say your person that's in early recovery is telling you, hey, there's a possibility that I might feel uncomfortable here and I might want to leave early. So if you're not in a place where you're okay with that, if you're well, no, this is my family and I really want to be there, I don't want to have to leave, that's fine. Just figure out a way that you guys can leave separately then. Have an alternative plan if you're not ready to go when they are. And if you do decide hey, whenever you feel uncomfortable, we'll get out of there. I'm here to support you if that's the route that you choose to take. When they do bring it up, don't fight them. You know what I mean? Stick to what you actually said. But once again, there's always options. If you're not comfortable with leaving early, then just find a way that they can get home safely, separately, if that's what you have to do.
Bob, Kevin, Jeff, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been really, really powerful stuff and great information for families and those in recovery. So appreciate your time and your willingness to do this. We typically end with favorite recovery quote, but since it's the holidays, favorite holiday song?
Favorite holiday song?
Do you have one?
For me, it's like that. I don't even know what it's called. I just like the Siberian Orchestra stuff.
Oh, yeah,
for
that's
sure.
good.
Yeah.
I want to go to one of
Yeah.
those concerts.
Yes,
I don't know if I could handle 90 minutes of it, though.
That'd be
I
tough.
love it.
I like it.
I'm going to have to try.
I'm gonna go with Mariah Carey. All I Want for Christmas.
Oh, my
classic.
We got to end it
Absolutely.
right there. I can't think of a song. I will say show Christmas Carol. You know, we're going to see Christmas Carol at the Walnut Theater tomorrow.
Nice.
I'm super excited for that. So I'm sure they'll break out some songs as well.
They
But
might.
just that whole idea, right? The whole redemption story.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for it. So
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today. If you or someone you know needs help, please call 1-833-RCA-ALUM. There are people like Kevin, Bob, standing by, Jeff, to help you or your loved one access care. Thank you. Join us next time. Thank you for listening to the Strength and Recovery podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please tap the subscribe button and leave us a review. We love hearing from our listeners and hope to reach more of you out there as we continue to share these incredible stories of recovery. The RCA alumni team aims to provide a safe, supportive environment for those in the recovery community, regardless of their affiliation with RCA. We host a full calendar of virtual and in-person meetings 7 days a week, 365 days a year, as well as free sober events every month. To learn more about what we do, find us at rcaalumni.com. Remember, if you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, pick up the phone and dial 1-833-RCA-ALUM. Help is available 24/7. Listen to another episode now or join us next time for the Strength and Recovery podcast.